Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I have two very special guests with me here today, Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, who are the founders of Gemini, the crypto exchange. Gentlemen, it's great to have you both.
Great to be on. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So many folks are familiar with both your backgrounds with Harvard and Facebook, but I wanted to get a few more details about your background. So where did you grow up? Where are you from and where are you guys currently residing?
Sure. So we grew up in Connecticut, and we currently live in New York City.
And between the time of after college and starting Gemini, can you fill in some gaps? What were you guys doing between that timeline before starting Gemini?
Yeah. So we started rowing in high school and did well enough to row in college. And then when we got to college, we did well enough to win a national championship. And decided to give it a shot afterwards. So we rowed for 4 years in high school, 4 years in college, and then kept rowing, made the Beijing Olympics, and ultimately hung up the oar when we were about 30. So got into crypto shortly thereafter by investing in Bitcoin and then starting Gemini about 6 years ago. So, but basically before Gemini, there was about a 15-year detour in the sport of rowing. So that was kind of like what filled the time there.
Got it. So when did you guys first come across Bitcoin? Was it on a forum? Someone told you about it? Curious about that.
So it wasn't on a forum. We actually found it when we went to Ibiza on vacation in August of 2012. We went out there and we certainly weren't looking for, crypto or Bitcoin.
Sure.
Or our next investment. At the time, we had just left rowing, and we're setting up Winklevoss Capital, which is a family office where we provide all the capital and invest. We focus on early stage startups, and we kind of felt like we were always going to start something again, but we weren't sure what that something was at the time. We felt like by investing, we could learn a lot, and we were really passionate about trying to, support other founders and people out there. So as we were setting that up, went off to Ibiza, and while there, a guy recognized us and said, "Hey, have you guys thought about virtual currency or Bitcoin?" We said, no idea what you're talking about. And we got to chatting, and initially it sounded pretty weird and out there.
Sure.
After a shot of tequila, it started to make a lot more sense. And we said, hey, let's DM us on Twitter. So when we got back stateside, we connected. We started reading a bunch and digging into Bitcoin. And we're pretty quickly hit with this moment. And I think at one point I turned to Tyler and I was like, look, this is either total bullshit or the next big thing. And we started going down that rabbit hole, and the rest is history. We've been kind of down it the last eight years.
Wow. And, how did the idea of building Gemini come about? Obviously, you made your investment in Bitcoin. Was it, hey, let's throw our hat in the ring and try to push the movement of Bitcoin? Was it something along those lines?
So a lot of that came about through our early experiences in the Wild West of Bitcoin, a lot of which is chronicled in Bitcoin Billionaires, which is written by Ben Mesrick, who wrote The Accidental Billionaires, which became the Social Network movie. Mm-hmm. So Ben wrote Bitcoin Billionaires, and it captures those early Wild West days. And it was exciting, but very freewheeling. We bought a lot of our early Bitcoin on Mt. Gox. And so we experienced firsthand it going down for 12 hours at a time in constant sort of brownout mode. Thankfully, we weren't caught up in the implosion, but we saw what was happening and we said, look, this is an amazing piece of technology. There's all this promise here, but it can't, in the current state of play, it'll never go mainstream. And so then we started to look at different teams to invest in through Winklevoss Capital. Are there teams we can support that can make a better exchange, a better custodian. And we met and talked with a bunch, and ultimately concluded that everybody was sort of thinking about it from a technology standpoint. How do I build a better exchange, a faster exchange? And nobody was really looking at it from the perspective of, well, we need to get licensed. How about compliance? We need to build banking relationships and integrate and build a bridge into the existing financial system. Not that we're not going to build a new system, but in order to build that new one, we have to be connected to the mainland in some level. And after going through that process of thinking about it, we said, we're pretty well positioned to do this. We love Bitcoin. We love this space. We love building. We're founders at heart. That's really where we want to be.
Sure.
Let's just go do this.
Very cool. And I've really been impressed with the work you guys have done with Gemini, because I felt you pioneered a lot of new features and standards. Obviously, SOC 1 and SOC 2 compliance, insurance, a lot of things I believe are very important for the infrastructure and the growth of the market, to give people confidence that they can come in and invest without worrying about hacks and things like that. So let's jump into Gemini, and if you can give an overview of your services. I know you guys provide clearing, custody. You also service retail and institutional investors. Can you give an overview in a nutshell?
Yeah, totally. So to start my answer, I would say that like the problem that we identified going on 6-7 years ago was that this is a new asset class where there's no trust. It's a scary place for most people, and there's all these sort of headlines of hacks and bad things happening. So we really built Gemini with this idea that we need to earn and maintain trust in this new asset class. And that starts with doing things the right way, asking permission, not forgiveness. Our 4 pillars are product, licensing, compliance, and security. Those have been foundational since day one. We don't compromise on any one of those. They're all 4 equally important to building trust in this new asset class. When Gemini, the actual platform on day one was a cryptocurrency, a Bitcoin exchange and custodian, because it was a Bitcoin world. Today, we have a number of different cryptos on the platform, including Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Zcash. Ethereum was our second coin, and we just added a lot of new exciting projects, including DAI, Orchid, Link, and BAT, the token of the Brave browser. Mm-hmm. And so we provide an exchange platform, but we also provide an ability to custody your crypto. And it's hard to describe. Sometimes we say it's an exchange, but it's really a platform, because in the world of crypto, a place like Gemini, you can do much more than just sort of buy and sell crypto.
Got it. Can you talk a bit about your insurance that you got set up? What's the coverage? Is it for both for retail and institutional investors?
So we have full coverage on our hot wallet. So anybody who has a standard Gemini account, some portion of your funds are in a hot wallet. And we do that so that we can settle transactions, withdrawals, and deposits in real time. So we obtained insurance coverage on that part of our custody system. And then we have gone and also gotten commercial coverage on our custodial product. I believe the number is around 200 million. And we also set up a captive insurance company in Bermuda to start self-insuring so that we could increase our insurance coverage, because the insurance industry is still learning and understanding Bitcoin and crypto. And so their appetite and ability to insure will increase. But obviously, we all know there's a lot more than a couple $100 million worth of value, not only at Gemini, but in crypto, in the whole ecosystem. So by creating a captive, we can start increasing our capacity. It's still new, early days, but we think that down the road, there's the potential for billions of dollars of insurance coverage in crypto.
And by becoming licensed, by getting the SOC 1, SOC 2, well, SOC 1 Type 1, SOC 2 Type 1 and Type 2, and insurance, we're trying to build a constellation of trust. So customers, it's not just us doing great technology, but it's also other people looking over our shoulders and signing off and saying, hey, they're doing exactly what they're saying they're doing. So that's what we're trying to build here, is a trusted product. And that when we came into Bitcoin, obviously there was a lack of trust, and unfortunately trust is still very much damaged every day in our industry. So we're trying to create the alternative to that.
Got it. And like I said, I think you guys are really setting the standard and raising the bar. I really appreciate that, being in the market and experiencing a lot of hacks and different things, and people asking, hey, what happened with Bitcoin? I heard it got hacked. And I want to get past that. You know, I know we're still in the early days, and like I said, I think you guys are really setting the standard for this. So let's talk about what fiat pairs and markets you're available in. Obviously the United States, but are you in Europe as well? Can you talk a bit about that?
So we are currently in the U.S. That's has been the main focus, and we have I think 49 states covered. We're also open in Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Europe, and the UK. So that's kind of the general footprint of the platform.
Got it. And can you talk a bit about GUSD? I believe that's your stable coin.
That's correct. I believe we launched that about 18 months ago, and it was a really interesting process because we had to figure out what the legal classification of a stablecoin is, and so is it, what is it? And I think we settled on open loop stored value. So it's basically like a gift card. It just has the crypto form factor. So yeah, that's our stablecoin.
The idea is to give fiat currencies, get them on the blockchain effectively. I personally think Bitcoin's not a great currency because I think of it as a store of value. It's appreciated a lot in value since we invested in it. So it's kind of like a stock or even gold. You don't necessarily want to sell that stock because you think it's going to appreciate in value. But some fiat currencies make good currency because they actually lose their value over time, hopefully not that much. So the idea is like bringing on assets that act as better mediums of exchange or currency to the blockchain and give them the cryptographic qualities like 24/7, 365, super global, easy, like sending an email. So that's a Gemini dollar. It's a centralized version of a stablecoin. There are decentralized stablecoins like DAI, which we just opened up as a trading book on Gemini. So right now we have Bitcoin US dollar pairs, we have Bitcoin DAI, and basically US dollar and DAI are the only two sort of fiat or fiat mimicking type pairs we have with the cryptos. But we look to add GBP and Euro. We're currently in a licensing process for the UK and Europe. And when that lands, it helps open up other fiat pairings. But right now it's DAI US dollar, but we look to expand that.
Got it. So there's of course questions from the community asking, hey, when may we see XRP, VeChain, Tezos? So I'm curious, and of course there's a lot of questions around XRP. So I'm curious, what's your plan? Obviously if you can share any type of timeline or your process for listing tokens, if you can share any updates there.
So the first thing we look at, so as a New York trust company, we are licensed to trade virtual commodities. We can custody commodities and securities, but we're not licensed to trade securities. We do have a broker-dealer ATS application pending with the SEC that would allow us to trade those types of securities, but currently we don't have that approval. So if something is potentially a security, we would have to do an analysis and get comfortable with it. So that's one thing that we look at first and foremost is what's the legal classification of this instrument? The other things we look at is who's the team behind it? Are they real? And what problem are they solving? And what's the community behind the project? So I think a good example is Zcash. When we did Zcash, a lot of people thought you could never get a privacy coin listed on a regulated New York trust company exchange. It was thought to be like, don't even try. Why bother? But we engaged with the DFS, and we helped educate them. In addition to Zuko and his team, Zuko Wilcox, one of the founders of Zcash, went down and spent a lot of time engaging and educating. And so it's a good example of a coin that a lot of people would have dismissed or decided was just not tenable or viable to be listed. But it was, a real team, and it's solving for a real problem. Commercial privacy is very important. Unfortunately in crypto, there's a lot of projects where it's just a white paper and not a whole lot else. Or it's sort of what I'd call crypto in search of a problem. Like, hey, we just want to raise a lot of capital and then go for it. And unfortunately, the excesses of that we're seeing a lot in 2017. And thankfully, I think we've moved beyond that. So there's a lot of factors in the way we think about these things. But that's generally the framework we use.
Got it. Now, there was recent news about JP Morgan opening up banking services, and your exchange, Gemini, was listed. I want to get your thoughts on how did that relationship come about, and also JP Morgan historically has been anti-crypto to a certain degree. Jamie Dimon coming out saying Bitcoin's a fraud, but seems to have changed his tune, and it seems the tide is changing there. What are your thoughts on that, on the whole situation?
So JP Morgan's definitely a very proud moment for Gemini. It took it's about pretty much 2 years in the making. A very heavy due diligence process of our security, our controls, our compliance, and just how we operate. It's similar to, we have a banking relationship with State Street and also Goldman Sachs. So I think it speaks a lot to how much trust we're trying to build in the ecosystem, to partner with partners like JP Morgan, State Street, Goldman Sachs. So it's just another sort of testament. Hopefully customers see that. But Wall Street's pretty sophisticated on crypto, and maybe early on there was rhetoric, but I think people see the merit in it and see that this is actually, this is very much the future of money, and they want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and we recently heard about a week and a half ago, Paul Tudor Jones mentioned he's putting 2% of his investments into Bitcoin. So what do you guys think about that? It seems along the lines we were just mentioning, the tide is changing here, and more of Wall Streeters are getting in.
Definitely a watershed moment when someone like Paul Tudor Jones is talking about Bitcoin and owning a material amount. What's really interesting is reading his macro outlook and viewpoint. It really aligns with what we've been kind of saying about Bitcoin all along for the past 8 years, that look, this is a very important store of value. It is really the only way to combat the money printing and all the shenanigans that have been going on in the market these days, which have only accelerated and gotten far worse. We were still running a deficit over the past decade every year in a bull run market, which is pretty hard to believe. And then of course it's just accelerated in the past couple months, with trillions of dollars being printed literally overnight. So it was really exciting. He's not just a great investor, but maybe one of the greatest of his generation.
Sure.
But it also kind of highlights that we're all in the same team a little bit. And that even, you can be in Wall Street and still see that there's real fundamental systematic problems going on right now. And so how do we solve that problem? And the answer that, we keep kind of coming to is the one technology that looks like it could do it is Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely in agreement with you there. And Bitcoin has survived so many catastrophic things that have happened, even recently with the pandemic and huge drop off and sell off. People are, oh no, it's going back to 1,000 or something, but it has once again recovered. So I want to talk a bit about, where do you see Bitcoin in the future? Because to your point, I believe it was Tyler, maybe you had mentioned it earlier, where it's no longer, well, I shouldn't say no longer, but its use case is being positioned as a store of value digital gold. And there's also the idea of how do we improve the day-to-day use, the usability, right, with the Lightning Network. So I want to get your thoughts on the shift in the use case, as well as when do you, from your end and building things, when we see the adoption of Lightning Network across the board?
It's a great question. I'm not sure Bitcoin needs to do much more than it's doing right now. I mean, being a decentralized gold is a pretty powerful concept. And the market cap of gold is 7 trillion and Bitcoin is a lot less. So there's a lot of room to grow. But if Bitcoin can build on top of that and be gold 2.0 and do a lot more with the Lightning Network or whatnot, then that's great. It's just like icing on the cake or maybe more cake. So that's sort of where I come down on Bitcoin. I don't think you need to buy coffee with Bitcoin. I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology, and it's a layer 1 settlement technology. But people don't buy coffee with bars of gold, and no one's complaining that, gold isn't shiny enough. So I think the gold story is for Bitcoin to sort of like win. It's the first mover. But there's obviously a lot of potential. It's an open source project that can continue to evolve and build more technology on top of it, like Lightning. So very much the sky is sort of the limit for Bitcoin.
And I would just add one sort of finer point on that, or additional point, which is that Bitcoin, we wouldn't be talking about crypto without Bitcoin.
Sure.
It basically provided the blueprint to decentralize almost anything. And so that alone is so much. And it just created that path for everything else beyond store of value. And it solves, it basically is in the store of value category. Well, that's an enormous contribution, one of the greatest contributions ever made in technology. So I would sort of argue that it's already doing way more than just store of value. But the actual asset of Bitcoin may just be, from a practical standpoint, store of value, but from a spiritual and an innovative standpoint, it's changed the entire world, and will be one of the greatest innovations for personal freedom, like the internet, if not greater, in terms of its impact.
Sure, and I think along the lines of it being a hedge against the money printing, the inflation and toxic capitalism, I think more people are seeing more clearly now the use case with what is happening globally and all the money printing that's taking place, especially here in the U.S. Being that hedge, its use case is even highlighted even further.
Yeah, I actually tweeted a couple of days ago about imagine if all of this was happening pre-Bitcoin and Bitcoin hadn't been invented yet. You would have no alternative, no other choice, no other system to try out. And it's a pretty frightening idea when you think about that. And thank goodness we actually have an opportunity to try something different right now. And you see with DeFi, it's still very new and young, but there's all these other potential opportunities. And so there's like hope. There is some hope there. But it's hard to imagine if this was happening a decade or two earlier, what would people do?
But what's also crazy is if you look at the inscription in the Genesis block, it's the '08 crisis. And the inscription in block 639,000 right before the recent halving is basically the money printing. So it's been 12 years and things are just continuing down this path. And at some point, there's going to have to be a day of debt reckoning. And thank God for Bitcoin.
So you just mentioned the third halving. I want to get your thoughts on it. I know it's set, in motion. A fourth halving coming in another 4 years and so forth. But what are your thoughts on the third halving and why maybe it was significant, even though we've had halvings before?
Well, I think it was the first halving that people on a mainstream level really understood what was happening. I had friends outside of crypto who have been thinking about crypto for a while, hear about it. And so when it starts to get to them and I start getting texts of like, hey, what about the halving? Should I buy now? That's very different than the last halving. I don't remember the last halving as this big moment. I'm trying to place myself where I was, but I can't. So I think that says something. And then the halving before then, I think I probably didn't even know it was happening. I was so new into Bitcoin. We got into Bitcoin in August of 2012. I don't know when the first halving happened, but if it happened after that, I didn't even know like the concept existed. So it's super different. Like it's in people's consciousness now with the pandemic in the backdrop. That's super huge. But each one of these, the catalyst is like an order of magnitude more. And so like when we started Gemini, the price of Bitcoin was $240. And when it hit 1,000, we're like, oh my God, we made it. This is great. Like we're doing so well. And then of course, 2017 happened. The whole world was like, oh, crypto now became this thing. It was just like, and then it hit 20,000, kind of went down to 5. We're back at 10. But I think we're ready for another run of an order of magnitude bigger. The amount of human capital that's in the space, the amount of code, the incredible projects, the effort. Certainly Gemini as a company is unrecognizable as the company that started 6 years. And I mean that in the sense that we're 300 people. We have offices around the world. The product, the features, the fact that it was just a Bitcoin exchange in the beginning, because that was the only thing. It's just a completely different world. The type of talent that's come to the space that we can attract. Our CTO was the CTO of the New York Stock Exchange. Our global head of financial crimes our chief compliance officer was the global head of fin crimes at Morgan Stanley. These people are joining us from Wall Street. They're coming into crypto in the revolution. So, and that wasn't happening in 6 years ago in 2014. It wasn't even really happening in 2017. It really started in about 2018. So it's a completely different game board. And the craziest part is that it's also like just beginning. It feels like it's the bottom of the first inning and it hasn't even started. So I couldn't be more excited about the future of cryptocurrency at this point.
Yeah, it's a great point you brought up. And the folks that, I don't know if they came to you or you poached them, but, coming from the traditional financial world and to your point, after 2017 in the bear market when things were not as spectacular. And during that time, we saw TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, and many others decide to set up shop as well. I did want to get your thoughts on what seems to be Gold Rush 2.0 happening in Texas with Bitcoin mining. You have Layer 1 backed by Peter Thiel, Whinstone. Seems like, and the government is allowing it, we're trying to possibly capture the Bitcoin hash power here. You take it away from China, I don't know. But a lot is happening in Texas. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I don't know Texas super well, like the landscape, but like the idea of bringing the supply chain of Bitcoin like onto U.S. soil seems like a great idea, or at least some of it, especially in the scheme of the pandemic. Sure. Where we see all these supply chains offshore and how sort of scary that can be. So I definitely applaud the idea of making Bitcoin mining at least having a home in the U.S. a bit.
Got it. I did have
and one of our additional portfolio companies is Crusoe Energy, and they're trying to recapture. So natural gas is flared, and because it's flared so that companies can drill for oil, and it's basically not used, and so they've been putting mining rigs into these areas where they capture the natural gas and mine Bitcoin. It's a really interesting way to harness energy that otherwise would not be used and wasted.
Sure.
There's also a positive environmental aspect to it. So we're seeing more and more mining companies start in the U.S., which is very interesting to see.
Yeah, there was a story recently recalled talking about it on the channel where a New York power plant was using the excess energy to mine Bitcoin. I think like $51,000 worth of Bitcoin every day. So it seems, to your point, excess energy and looking at maybe solar power down in Texas and with as much land as you have and sunshine there. So it seems folks are looking for the cheap energy and alternatives, clean energy to mine as well.
Totally.
I did have a question here. Quantum computing is on the rise. Do you feel it will be a threat to Bitcoin and maybe other cryptos? Or do you feel maybe over time we'll adapt to it? Maybe developers will build the proper layers and technologies to protect Bitcoin and the other cryptos?
So our view is always that the Bitcoin, the SHA-256, which is the algo for mining, can always be replaced, and that's the beauty of Bitcoin, the open source nature of it. So it can basically evolve to solve for quantum computing. It's not sort of something that's set in stone, and if it gets broken down the road that they can't adjust it. So I fully believe that Bitcoin will just sort of update and amend the source code to choose a new hash algorithm or whatever it is that solves for that problem. I think generally cryptography, has stayed ahead of the code breakers and the hackers. And so I'm pretty confident it's a sort of a non-problem that we'll solve when we get there.
Yeah, I think in short, the ability to outrun the code breakers is much easier than for the code breakers to build faster computers. So this is probably simplifying things a bit, but if you just extend a private key or a public key pairing from, let's say, 250 bits to, double that, you need tremendous more computing power to break it than you do to actually work within the new crypto. So, that's why code breakers have been being outrun since actually World War II. If you go back to like the Enigma systems during World War II and then on. So I think there's going to be quantum resistant encryption, and it's already working. And I'm confident that the systems will continue to evolve. Like if it was set in stone, then it would be a little scarier, but obviously we know it's not. And a lot of new projects are coming out and using very different signing curves than Bitcoin, right? The current new projects, and There's so many new waves of projects, even this year, that are using more novel crypto. Hopefully not too novel, in the sense that like good crypto has been in the field and battle tested and peer reviewed for a little while, but new enough to keep innovating as well.
Got it. I want to get your thoughts on Ethereum 2.0. So we've got confirmation from Vitalik it's going to happen this year, with fingers crossed. Moving to proof of stake, what are your thoughts around that? And moving away from proof of work, of course.
It's interesting. We're investors in Ethereum. We own Ethereum, and we're long, quite long that entire project. We're also long Tezos, which started off as proof of stake. So it's an interesting different work algorithm, and I think that the challenge is you've got so much value on the existing Ethereum chain, and to move it into the proof of stake is really tough, and it's taken a long time. But I'm definitely optimistic. I think there's a tremendous community behind Ethereum. It's one of the most vibrant communities in crypto. So I think we're excited and we're prepared to support it. So one other thing, also just circling back to the mining question, we needed to confirm whether it was public, but we actually are investors in Layer One.
Oh, okay.
I mentioned our investment in Crusoe Energy, which is a mining company, but we're also in Layer One, and so we've got two U.S. based mining companies in our portfolio.
Very
right.
cool.
And the chief security officer of Layer 1 was the security engineer at Gemini. So it's kind of a fun fact.
Wow. Very cool. So I would love to get some updates from you guys maybe later on, have you back on the show in the future as things get going down in Texas and mining there with Layer 1, of course.
Totally.
There was
one other thing on on Ethereum, or Tezos or any staking coin, the idea of people being able to earn like 5, 6, 7, 8% is pretty powerful in this environment where interest rates are zero, maybe potentially negative. So all of a sudden, like the current fiat regime system, the money printing, the deficit, the ballooning debt, and the zero to negative interest rates, people are just waking up like, this system's really messed up. Like, what's my other choices? And they're going to see Bitcoin. They already are starting to see Bitcoin as a hedge against that. But Ethereum 2.0 and all these other staking coins is an ability to earn yield. They're going to see that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I interviewed the co-founder of Tezos, Arthur Brightman. We were talking about that. And the Tezos staking is very popular right now, and looking forward to the Ethereum staking as well. So there was a news report, and you guys can verify this, that Mark Zuckerberg spoke to you, both of you, to get your input on Libra, the Libra coin. What's your involvement there? Is that an accurate statement? And what do you think about the Libra coin overall?
Yeah, that's not. I don't know where you saw that news report. The way you described it is not accurate. So I think that Libra is a really interesting project. It's certainly changed a bit from where it started. It's not clear to me if it's going to be like a stable coin on an open blockchain network, or is it going to be more of like a closed credit system, like a WeChat, like the currency in WeChat. But either way, it got like the conversation started. Like stablecoin all of a sudden became this mainstream word that people are talking about that aren't even crypto. So it was a big boon for the industry. I think we need to learn more about the Libra project, but it sounds very cool and serious and some interesting tech. So we're definitely open to it.
Got it. So a few more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Is there any misconceptions that you would like to address that maybe folks have about the two of you, and if any?
I'm sure there's a lot.
Yeah, there's probably too many to count.
I think a lot of people's perception probably came from the Social Network, which we really enjoyed as a film. Think it's like a great piece of art, but it's obviously trying to tell a story in 2 hours. I mean, you could spend 10 hours and still not get the full story. And I think the characters, while there's certain values around like integrity and things like that we identify with, they don't really come off as entrepreneurs. They're a little two-dimensional. I think that the filmmakers chose that path to sort of, to create these different characters and create a good story. But I think that a lot of people are sort of surprised that we really are entrepreneurs. And this is the space where we're happiest and most comfortable in. And that comes out over time as we sort of do more and build more, and people say, oh, okay, what are these guys up to now? Oh, they're building Gemini, crypto exchange and stuff like that. So, but look, it was a fun moment, and it's still, it's kind of cool. Like, I think it's being streamed a lot on Netflix now during quarantine, and like people are seeing it. And I'm like getting on phone calls or Zoom videos, and people are like, I was literally just watching the Social Network in the background. So it's very like meta and a bit surreal.
Mm-hmm.
I bet.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that Gemini is an exchange, maybe only for institutions, which is not true. We have obviously institutional grade technology and infrastructure, but we have a mobile app. Gemini is for everyone. It's super simple to use, download. So yeah, I think that we have a big retail story as well. So yeah.
So final question here, and you may not be able to disclose everything, but if you can drop any hints. But what else can we expect from Gemini in 2020? Any exciting things that you can maybe allude to?
I think that one of the obvious ones that we can allude to is we are looking to add more fiat currencies to the platform. So right now, all of our pairs are US dollar against crypto, or crypto against crypto. And so I think you can expect to see things like the British pound, potentially the euro, and other dollars around, in fiat dollars. We're going to continue to expand our footprint in Europe. We already have a small office there. We have a head of Europe, head of Europe UK, a compliance officer there as well, and we'll be building that out. And we're also looking to hire and build an office in Singapore. So Gemini the first 5 years has been pretty US focused and building like the platform out there. And over the next year, we talk a lot about going mobile and global. So taking the Gemini platform to other parts of the world and just extending it. Tyler, I don't know if I left off anything or.
Yeah, we'll be also adding more cryptos, so stay tuned. But many more features, really cool stuff coming down the line. I think the next year from here on out will be one of our most exciting. So stay tuned for sure.
Awesome. Cameron, Tyler, great things happening on your end. I love the work you guys are doing on Gemini. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Lots of fun.